According to Buddhist legend, the ruler of the ancient world's largest empire spent his final days giving away everything he owned. Fearing he would empty the state treasury, his ministers cut off his access to it. So he gave away his personal possessions, until he was left with just a single myrobalan fruit, which he also gifted to the monastic order, before quietly passing away. How does an emperor with absolute dominion over millions willingly reduce himself to nothing? To understand the end, we have to go back to his beginning. Ancient texts claim his mother, Subhadrangi, was kept away from the king by a bitter palace intrigue. When the plot finally unraveled and she gave birth to a son, she supposedly exclaimed, "I am now without sorrow." The boy was given a name that reflected her relief, Ashoka, literally meaning without sorrow. It is one of history's great ironies that a child named for the absence of grief would grow up to engineer a staggering amount of human suffering, long before he ever became a symbol of peace. As a young prince, Ashoka showed little interest in philosophy. He was a highly capable, ruthless military commander, dispatched by his father to provincial hubs like Ujjain and Taxila to crush local uprisings by force. When his father, Emperor Bindusara, died in 273 BCE, the empire was plunged into a vicious 4-year succession crisis. While later legends claim he murdered 99 of his own brothers to secure the crown, the historical reality is that he waged a calculated, bloody war for the Magadha throne, backed by key political ministers like Radhagupta. Ashoka did not step into power as an enlightened philosopher king. He began his rule as a traditional, blood-soaked expansionist, ready to enforce his will with the edge of a sword. In the 9th year of his reign, Ashoka turned his eyes to Kalinga, a wealthy region on the east coast. He marched his massive army out to bring one of the last independent territories on the subcontinent under Mauryan control. Ashoka's immense territory stretched from Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal. Kalinga was a glaring strategic gap. He won the territory, but the slaughter was staggering. 100,000 people were killed, and 150,000 taken prisoner. Normally, ancient conquerors boasted about this kind of devastation, but walking the battlefield, Ashoka experienced a complete psychological break. Seeing the sheer scale of death and the suffering of innocent civilians and ascetics, he was overwhelmed by intense, paralyzing remorse. The historian H.G. Wells later noted that out of all the records we have of human history, Ashoka is the only military monarch who abandoned warfare right after winning a total victory. This was the pivot point of his reign. He officially declared that physical occupation and violence would end. The traditional drums of war, Bari-Ghosha, were entirely replaced by the call to righteousness, Dhamma-Ghosha. Ashoka's Dhamma functioned as a civic code of conduct. It prioritized a shared social ethic over narrow religious rituals, demanding mutual respect, tolerance between competing sects, and a strict commitment to nonviolence. It also translated into practical state policy. Ashoka ordered his government to prioritize welfare, famously setting up hospitals specifically designed to treat both human beings and animals. Ashoka did something no Indian ruler had done before. He spoke directly to his subjects, carving messages into massive public stone surfaces, like this Brahmi script. In these vulnerable edicts, he publicly confessed his deep regret for Kalinga, instructing officials to kindly respect all life. In the later years of his reign, he engraved these edicts onto highly polished monolithic sandstone columns. They were topped with intricate animal capitals, transported down the Ganges River, and placed in highly visible public spaces. Ashoka had invented an alternative, empathetic model of governance. For the first time, the state machinery was focused on recognizing the dignity of human life, rather than the relentless expansion of its borders. Which brings us back to those final days. Convinced that the ultimate purpose of his wealth was charity, Ashoka's relentless gifting to the Buddhist monastic order terrified his ministers, leading them to freeze his access to his own state treasury. When he died around 232 BCE, the great emperor possessed virtually nothing, stripped of his personal wealth in pursuit of his ideals. And almost immediately, his political reality caught up with him. Without his towering presence, the massive Mauryan Empire slowly disintegrated, completely collapsing within 50 years of his death. Ashoka's vision of a completely non-violent state was ultimately too radical for the harsh geopolitical realities of the ancient world. But the fall of his empire was hardly the end of his story. By sending out dedicated missionaries, including his own children, Mahinda and Sangamita, who traveled to Sri Lanka, Ashoka elevated Buddhism from a regional Indian sect into a global religious force. Centuries later, when Chinese travelers visited India, they found his massive stone structures in ruins, like the stupa. Yet they noted that his memory still resonated across the entire Asian continent. The man behind the myth was finally recovered by scholars like James Prinsep, who deciphered the forgotten Brahmi script on his pillars, linking the legendary king to the historical author of the Rock Edicts. Today, his legacy sits at the very heart of the modern Indian identity. The Republic of India adopted his intricately carved lion capital as its official national emblem. His empire fractured, and his grand stone palaces eventually crumbled into dust. But Ashoka's core message, that true conquest is found through righteousness and tolerance, remains one of history's most enduring arguments for peace.